Hello. There aren't many people who can claim to have changed the course of history and created modern gaming culture in the UK as we understand it. But surely amongst those few must count the founders of Games Workshop and the creators of Fighting Fantasy. My guest today is responsible for some of the best, most interesting, and most innovative experiences in gameplay storytelling. He has pushed the boundaries beyond anything done before in terms of immersion and technology, using new ways to engage the audience in the adventure. He co-wrote The Warlock of Firetop Mountain with Sir Ian Livingstone and went on to create perhaps the greatest expression of the gamebook form with the Sorcery series. And he used telephone technology to dial up probably the most exciting adventure ever recorded in fantasy interactive scenarios by telephone. I'm talking, of course, about an individual who created so many stories, so many adventures, and so many games. I'm Jordan, this is Jordan Sorcery, and today I'm privileged to be in conversation with Steve Jackson. Just before we begin, I wanted to note that due to some of the quirks of the software during our call, there were interruptions and a few technical problems, but I have tried to seamlessly get rid of those using some annotations where I've brought up visual cues of the things that Steve is talking about. Hopefully, you'll enjoy the conversation just as much as I did, and you'll be able to see some of the amazing things that he's created. Steve, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate you finding the time to have a chat.
Pleasure.
So I thought we'd start by maybe just talking about how you and Ian Livingstone and John Peake actually founded Games Workshop back in 1975. What was it like at that time, and what was it like starting a company from scratch?
From scratch. Well, the thing is that the three of us were sharing a flat, and we all hated our jobs. I mean, Ian was working in the marketing department somewhere, oil company, I think. John was a civil engineer, and he just started working on the Jubilee line, I think it was. And I was, not really doing much at it. John had told the people on the building site that I was a great model maker, and they needed a model making the top of this building at Petty France. And I was just the person to do it. A model maker, I can't do model. But anyway, I had to go. Did much better than the guy who was doing it before me. And they actually used this balsa wood model that I built, which was a huge thing, to show the engineers what the top of the building is supposed to look like. That was the bit they couldn't get. But with a model to help them, it was good. But then after, I stretched that out about as far as I could, which was until October, November time. And then the model was finished, and it was cold out there on the building site. And I had to find an indoor job quick. And I ended up selling scientific instruments to the Middle East, a company called Gallencamp. But I can't really say that I worked there, because this was about the time that we discovered Dungeons and Dragons, and it was an obsession. And I used to sit there during the day, writing out these invoices for complete science labs, and secretly on my lap, drawing dungeons. And they never twigged on that. But then I gave up. I mean, I was the first one to give up because I didn't have a proper job. I had a labouring job. And I also knew the publisher of Games and Puzzles magazine, and that was a professional magazine at the time, the only one. And I'd gone along to see if there's anything I could do, maybe packing boxes. And it turned out that Graham Levin, who owned the company, was desperately looking for people to join the games testing panel and other testing panels. And he was glad to have an extra hand on board. So that was good. I remember my first game that I ever reviewed was Kingmaker, I think. And it was a terrible example It was an English game by an English company, and yet it was terrible. You couldn't play it. The rules were awful. Yeah. Anyway, that was that, and so eventually we had this monumental trip to America to reach Gen Con, and Ian and I went. John had given up by this time. He didn't really fancy the idea of fantasy games at all. He was into wooden games. Hence the name Games Workshop. John had a workshop in his bedroom in this flat in Shepherd's Bush, and he was getting fed up with that because none of these girls that he brought back would stay with him because the floor was covered in wood chippings. So he left, and it was probably a good thing at the time because Ian and I were obsessed with fantasy, Dungeons and Dragons, superheroes, that kind of thing. And John just wasn't really. He was a very good craftsman, making backgammon sets, and sold quite a few. But it was still not how Games Workshop was destined to be as a fantasy game publisher.
And then it was a number of years later, having created Games Workshop and done some incredible work to sort of grow the UK RPG market and starting creating your own games. In 1982, you would then publish the Warlock of Firetop Mountain. I mean, what was the sort of early days of fighting fantasy like? I mean, how did it feel sort of pivoting into that kind of space?
Yeah, no, I remember it was so proud, as every author is, to see your book published. And I remember on the day it was supposed to have been published, it was sometime in August, I think, in 1982. I was working from an office in King Street in Richmond, and a couple of doors up, there was the Open Book, was a little family-owned bookshop. And I thought, I wonder if they've got it in. And I went to the back of the shop to the children's section, and right down in the corner were 2 copies of the Warlock of Firetop Mountain. It was really chuffed to see them in there. I mean, the thing is, that a week later they were still there.
Because it didn't sort of sell initially. It didn't fly off the shelves right at the beginning, did it? Did it take a little bit of time to spin up?
It did, yeah. The thing is, a penguin or puffin, they had a big argument about whether it should be a penguin or a puffin book. It was written like a penguin book for adults, but the Puffin Book Club had 50,000 subscriptions, and it would be a shame to waste that. So they published as a puffin, and it turned out well because that subscription was very instrumental in producing the sales were just fantastic at the time. Once there were a couple of things that happened, and I think Ian's memory is better than mine on one of them was an appearance on Radio 1, which was treated as a live action game by the disc jockey, and so he'd have the audience would have people from the readership phoning in and say turning left, turning right, and it was supposed to last for 5 minutes. It lasted for about half an hour, so we've obviously got something there. But yeah, that was it was really exciting, and the first, like you say, they weren't expecting very much. It was 5,000 copies, I think, they had printed of the first edition of Warlock, and they had no idea how it was going to sell. It was like no other book, and luckily for a number of publicity opportunities, they realised they'd got a bit of a hit on their hands. The rest is history. They reprinted 10,000 and another 20,000. It kept on going like that. And at the time that I think Death Trap Dungeon was the most popular release. I think they sold 80,000 copies of that in the first week, which was just phenomenal. And yeah, it was parties all around. We got flown out on publicity trips to the Far East and all that kind of thing. So it was exciting, very exciting.
Yeah, I'll bet. So it must have been quite different to those early days of Games Workshop when it was kind of a very different, very tough.
Yeah. in the back of a van. You see, we'd gone to Gen Con because we were now sucked in with fantasy games. We thought we'd go to this convention called Gen Con. It was in Wisconsin, and really there were probably 150 people there, but the people that were there represented virtually the entire hobby games, fantasy role-playing games industry, and we were treated like, oh, are you from England? Yeah, are you going to sell our books and miniatures? And they were so chuffed. I mean, a good example of this is that TSR had decided that we'd be good as a distributor for them. They had no idea that we were running out of a flat. I mean, as far as they were concerned, it wasn't exactly a factory or a publishing house or anything, but it was a flat in Shepherd's Bush. And it was, the impression was, because we were doing Alan Weasel as well, the impression was that this is something substantial. So Gary offered us an exclusive distribution arrangement for Dungeons and Dragons if for 3 years, if we would make an order for the game. Fantastic. Well, we placed an order for the game. It was for 6 copies. 6 copies of the game gave us the exclusive European distribution rights, and we were sailing. I mean, that was fantastic. The sales every month were almost double the 1 month before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with so much going on in Games Workshop, did you still have time to play any games? Were you still actually playing D&D at the time?
Well, D&D, we played quite a lot, really. I mean, it was a bit dull for anybody who wasn't into D&D at the time. Was subjected to play this game. It's fantastic. Well, it's not actually a game. What do? You don't win. There's no winning and losing and that kind of. So we had to explain it to all our friends. Most of them bought copies of Dungeons and Dragons, but probably never played them. But it was obvious there was something brand new in the wings there, and people did get quite up about it. And we used to have sessions around at the flat, and the flat turned into a bit of a shop. After we come back from Gen Con, we had nowhere to live because we'd packed all our wares, all our stock into the back of my van. I had a van that I used I had a vegetarian restaurant with my sister who lived in Brighton. We had a van, packed everything into the van, and then when we came back from Gen Con, we had to do something with all the stock in the van. And we had nowhere to live. We had nowhere to have an office. And these things came along. I think we got our flat for £6 a week. I think it was something like that. For the two of us. Ian and John had left by now. And yeah, we found the estate agents who we were 97 Uxbridge Road was behind the estate agents, and people used to come along expecting to see a shop and find out there was a bread bin about half the size of this room. And we had one employee, Trevor Graver, who was our first employee, and he was basically set to do mail orders, to handle mail orders. And if any customers came in, they'd walk around in astonishment. The place was so small. And if they came in, Trevor and Ian and I had to leave to make room for them. Yeah, it was crazy. I remember we had this little layout in strings of wood with lots of minifigs. But eventually the estate agents decided that they wanted this room that they let out to us back again. And we said, that's fine, just find us a new place, your estate agents. And they did. And it was 97 Uxbridge Road. And that was that was our base for about 2 years, I suppose. And that was like a proper shop, with space for stock and little areas where you could play. And that was amazing to see, because we did this launch thing where the first person to buy a copy of Dungeons and Dragons on a certain Saturday morning got it for 10p instead of £6, 10p. I don't know whether that came up. Do you know, we're so kind of obsessed. No, not really as obsessed with that, but we wanted to be as fair as possible. So we'd taken the exchange rate with dollars and worked it out precisely to what it was and what it would cost if we were to buy them in pounds. And so we came back with £6.10. Anyway, the person who won the prize for the first Dungeons and Dragons had arrived the night before. It was a Friday night, and we had somebody from, I think, military modelling or something who we were doing interviews with, and this character just sort of parked himself outside the door, and we thought, what's he doing here? You know, so it never occurred to us that actually he was a customer, and he was after that Dungeons and Dragons, and he stayed there all night, waiting up for Dungeons and Dragons at 10p. And Empire of the Petal Throne was another one that was not quite so popular as D&D, but that was a great price of $16.94, I think it was.
Right. Which I'm guessing was a fair whack at the time.
It was a lot of money, yeah. No, I mean, it was. Would we dare spend that much? Price them up that far? But then we had Dungeons and Dragons selling at a reasonable price, and then this Empire of the Petal Throne, which soon dropped out of there. I mean, they started publishing all sorts of different types of books. But this is TSR Hobbies now, and the company that Gary Gygax was. I think he owned it. It was very strange the way the ownership of TSR went. I've just been reading up on it, actually. And gradually it got taken over more by Kevin and Brian Bloom. And they started installing, I think they had a majority shareholding, something like that, and they were bringing in more of the Bloom family. And it all seemed a bit sort of, they did actually offer us a deal where we would be taken over, or actually it was a merger. They would merge with Games Workshop, and we'd get a chunk of stock, which seemed quite generous at the time, I have to say. But the politics were not so good. They sent this guy called Al Saunders over to check up on us and see whether he thought we were any, worth the money or whatever. And we picked him up from the airport, and he was this guy that looked like meatloaf. He was just huge. And he trying to take him round the West End. He couldn't get out of Ian's car without being pushed from the inside. And all it seemed that he was interested in doing was selling doggy thermometers. He was like an opportunist, a trader, I suppose, what you might call it, that he traveled around the world, or particularly the Far East, and then bring stuff, to America. And at that particular time, he was trying to flog these doggy thermometers. Anyway, Games Workshop didn't become a doggy thermometer retailer. Have you ever sold any of them? Anyway, this was quite a tense time for us, because they'd set a time limit on it, as when the 3-year European exclusive came up for.
Yeah, because there was a period there where you didn't have the exclusive rights, but you were still selling D&D, wasn't there?
Well, the big mistake that they made, there were two of them actually, they Don Turnbull was going to be running it, and they said, okay, you need a car as well. So, and he bought a Jaguar for him. And apparently TSR didn't like that at all, because in America, Jaguars are much more expensive than they are in the UK. And so that was a bit of a no-no, spending that much on a car. But the other thing is, and this is a business decision, that all they had to do was cut us off as, not supply us at wholesale prices. Because what happened was, most of the customers just kept on ordering from us. Yeah, we had White Dwarf, we could do Dungeons and Dragons. The margins were lower on D&D for us, but it was still, it was doable, and we had all this extra stuff. So we really didn't notice much of a change in sales at all. It kept on growing. And had they just said, okay, you're only going to get retail margins now, then that would have really hurt, because everybody else would have to go to TSR to buy their Dungeons and Dragons. And they didn't do it. It was good. Kept Games Workshop going. We'd already decided we were going to publish our own games, and that was really where the Empire Strikes Back, British Empire Strikes Back, came about. We picked out 4 games that we knew and did a big number about making them British games, and we got the British Empire Strikes Back was the slogan, and it was really quite neat. And just at the time that we'd got approached by George Lucas' company to saying cease and desist, because the advert going into the back, going through space in the background, and I think it was quite successful, actually. Yeah, it's a good one.
I mean, you mentioned White Dwarf there as well, because that was something that you and Ian were also running during that whole period as well. I mean, that just, how were you able to do all of that simultaneously? It seems like a lot of work.
Yeah, no, it was a lot of work, actually. We didn't publish it monthly to start off with. We published it fortnightly. So not fortnightly.
So every other month, wasn't it? But by month.
Yeah, that's right. The White Dwarf was kind of Ian's. He came back from. Well, at the time we'd been working from that bread bin shop around the back of the estate agents, and we. He came back. We're working from the flat as well, and Ian came back one day and said, "I've got an idea. What do you think of this? We're going to upgrade Owl and Weasel, which was our little fanzine that we did, and it was like a mini magazine, but it was all sort of it was done on a small scale." And he said, "Right, what we want to do is turn Owl and Weasel into a proper magazine, and let's take the plunge and do it." So we did it about how much it was going to cost and how many copies we needed to sell to break even and that sort of thing. And I think it was pretty much universally accepted that we'd have a go with this and just, make sure we do it. And it works out well, because people who took White Dwarf, Owl and Weasel, they all took White Dwarf as well, and the shop started selling White Dwarf. I mean, you couldn't really sell through Owl and Weasel through shops because it was too amateurish, really. But White Dwarf got everybody's attention. The White Dwarf, which is a White Dwarf star, and also a fantasy character with white skin. And it's still there after, I don't know how many copies have been sold now. I think the circulation must be about 50, 60,000, something like that. Although it has changed a lot. When we were in charge, we liked role-playing games primarily, but also other games as well. We had no ambitions to take over all the different types of game. But after some time with Bryan being in charge, he decided that he didn't want the rest of the rest of the content. He's only interested in the Warhammer stuff, and the whole magazine became a Warhammer magazine. Well, it was sort of, oh goodness, you think this is a wise idea? It's just work on just publish stuff about one game. Well, there we are, 50,000 or 60,000 or whatever it is now. It's definitely the right decision.
Yeah, because you worked quite closely with Bryan Ansell for a period of time there. Once he'd come in to co-found Citadel and to work with Games Workshop, under Games Workshop, under you and Ian, and sort of expanding that side of the business. What was it like working with Bryan Ansell during that period?
Bryan was in and out like but I hadn't say all drawers. But he didn't think he was getting a fair cut of the budget, the Games Workshop budget. He thought that the miniatures were making more money, so they ought to get more of the cash that was spread out. At the time, we were a bit concerned because we'd got retail shops going, and we'd gone in for some deals with the big boys like Sinclair Spectrum, Waddington's Games, Parker Brothers as they were, and they were offering deals where you take the stock in January, but you didn't have to pay for it till December. And that sounded like a fantastic deal, all a year's credit. So we bought, and we overbought, and at the end of the December, when the payment was due, suddenly, it's a bit worrying. But anyway, we saw through that, and yeah. It was good.
Yeah. And then obviously having created the Fighting Fantasy books, and now you're not just running Games Workshop, you're also writing an increasing number of Fighting Fantasy books.
Yeah.
It certainly seemed to be quite a sort of, there was a period of significant change there, it sounds like.
Well, it wasn't a good time for us to be having girlfriends, that's for a start. Because we were just, that's all it was. I mean, wake up at about 7:30, drive into workshop, which was probably half an hour's drive. Spend a day there, jump in the car, get back home, typewriter out, and continue what we were writing before. And you couldn't stop, and you couldn't go on really. I mean, I think the girlfriends didn't do well. But we were just stuck, what could we do? We couldn't do less. Actually, strangely enough, we never lost any of our relationships at the time. That's surprising. We were the first nerds. That. Yeah.
One of the Fighting Fantasy books that I wanted to talk to you about was the House of Hell. So the horror Fighting Fantasy book that you wrote is really the only one in that genre that was sort of truly in that genre. I just wondered where the idea came from to explore a horror story in Fighting Fantasy.
I remember thinking at the time, Ian was extending the Alancia series of books and using the same characters to link them all together and that sort of thing. It's a good idea. And I was a bit more, I didn't like the idea of just doing the same thing over and over again. Even Ian himself had said there's only so many things you can do in a dungeon. And he extended that, whereas I was looking for new areas to go. So Sorcery came along because Sorcery that was like a personal favor to one of the editors, Geraldine Cook, who she discovered Fighting Fantasy. She was the one who originally got in touch and pushed it on Penguin, and so finally said yes. But then they promptly had the books published by Puffin, so he got none of the acclaim for it, which I thought that was a bit unfair. So I always promised him I'd do something a bit more adulty. and that's where Sorcery came in. And I have no idea how I managed to do, as that was about 1,000 references, maybe more than that. No, that's right, 800 was it? Crown of Kings. So the rest of them, she's must have been 2,000. Yeah. So that was one, an adulty book, which suited more mature players. I tried superheroes, Appointment with Fear, House of Hell. Well, Starship Traveller was the first one. That was a science fiction one, and that was based entirely on Star Trek. Star Trek was one of my favorite programs at the time, and so it was all based on that. And then after that, it was House of Hell, like you say, and it's House of Hell. Well, I had this obsession. I wouldn't call it an obsession, but we really liked horror films, and so why not do something? And what came out was pretty much what you'd expect, a schlock horror film, along the lines of the Hammer films, which I used to watch. It was, I don't know whether you'd say particularly innovative, but it was a typical horror story. The car breaks down in the middle of the night, it's pouring with rain. Where can you get some shelter? Spooky old house. It's just not far from where you've broken down. And then you get invited in, and then you get to do some of the stuff that generally goes on. There's a sacrifice in there. Actually, that's interesting. The sacrifice. We had to. There was an illustration in there of a victim on a sacrificial table, and they wouldn't let us leave that bit in. They had to paint out the areas of the victim before they let it go through. It didn't really matter that much, and I thought, I've never done another one since, a horror one. I don't know how you.
Yeah,
interesting. Never really thought about doing another one. But I suppose that would be the one to do, something that tacks on to the House of Hell, because that has been. I mean, I said Death Trap Dungeon has been the most successful, I guess, non-fantasy, and House of Hell probably is the next one.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That was great. I mean, the other thing that, amongst the many projects that you and Ian undertook, sort of tied to Fighting Fantasy, were the puzzle quests. So you did the Tasks of Tantalon, and Ian did the Casket of Souls. I've recently been trying to tackle the Task of Tantalon.
Oh dear, yeah.
And it's tough.
Yeah. Yeah, it is tough. Yeah, and the thing is, I always thought with the model for this was Masquerade by Kit Williams, who's been going for, I don't know, a year or something, and nobody had found the rabbit. Just to fill in that Kit Williams did this puzzle book that looked like Tacitan's Lana Casket of Souls. It was hidden somewhere in the UK, and you have to try and find where it is. Well, geez, I mean, the UK is a big place, and he didn't make it. It was a really interesting book, and that there was sure. I mean, I can't deny the influence there. But these 12 different puzzles, and I actually enjoyed designing these puzzles. I mean, they're not all completely new, but it was quite good fun. I remember we came down, we had a shop in Glasgow, another one in Edinburgh, and we were just coming down on the train from the Edinburgh shop, and we'd been talking to David Fickling, who was an editor at Oxford University Press. He was really keen on doing this colour version, and we'd been talking before about how about we do a colour book, and most publishers would say too expensive, will never sell. But he was keen to do it, and he took some risks. And Tacitan's ended up selling quite well, and I don't know how many people actually got it. I did published a little booklet about looked a bit more like Owls and Weasel, um, and he. Uh, he liked the way it's come out, and it was a good format. It was about 3 years later that Ian McCaig finally came back with Casket of Souls, which was the Ian's version. But I say I did this little. If I can find one, I'll send you a copy if you like. It was called The Solution to Tests of Tensilon, and they probably sold about 500-600 of them at the time. Like
Yeah, I think
50p.
that's essential stuff because there's some of the puzzles are quite tricky. I'm finding so far.
I can help you out with one or two if you can.
Well, I might have to put down my notes and fire them over, and you can correct me and tell me where I'm going wrong.
Yeah, yeah, that's good.
But yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating book, and just on the actual production of it, did you? Because obviously it's so visual, all of those puzzles. Did you design the puzzles and sort of specify the brief and say, here's what this page needs to look like, and here's how the puzzle should be sort of part of the
Yeah,
art?
yeah. It had to be done, and I have to say, and I don't think Stephen would will object to it, that when he finally delivered all the manuscripts, I mean, I'd scribbled stuff on paper and given him briefs and that sort of thing. But he was a very like what you call a factual writer. He's artist. He yeah he like for example, there's one which is a there was one which was the Hag Witch, and she's got a certain number, but some of them are a certain number of Hag Witches, and they counted, and there's a couple of them that are a bit difficult to count, because what I'd realized at the time is that if you do a book like Kit Williams and you go to all that trouble of making it beautiful to play, work of art, if somebody solved it within 2 months, you've got no product left anymore, and the sales stopped and everything. So you had to make the puzzles quite difficult to do, because if you give it away too cheaply, I mean, Ian McCaig was ridiculous. Was it? So there was one that he did, which was a little tiny ring that was in the illustration, and it was furry sort of thing. So it was and this was known as the red hair ring. Red hair ring. So if you look up,
Okay.
and the one that I was particularly pleased with was well, the first one was a good one actually. That was an old puzzle, and that was rescue somebody, and you have to decide whether to pull or push this lever.
Yeah.
And one we push it one way, it lowers Sir Lancelot into the pit, the fiery pit, and if you push it the other way, it raised him out of the pit. And that worked well. I thought he did a great job with that. But there were things like the what else was in there? There was a map that had to be solved, and that's I mean, I not really go through all of them, but it
Sure.
happy to help if you get stuck on particular ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean the Hag Witch one. It's interesting you mentioned that because I thought that I've done that one, and I thought this maybe is a bit too easy because I feel like I've got this, but I suspect now that you've mentioned it, there's maybe some hidden Hag Witches that I've not found that are hidden away. So
Well,
I might
they're
need to
all
revisit
fair.
that one.
They're all fairly hidden. I
Hmm.
think there's nothing where you could say, "Oh bloody hell," to solve that one. But yeah, that was good. And it got printed in Japanese. I have no idea how they could do with it, turn it into Japanese. I mean, so these were visual puzzles, not just text puzzles. That what I started to tell you about the trip from Edinburgh.
Hmm.
on the train. On that train, on that journey, I got 10 of the 12 puzzles to which, so that really started things off. And the good thing about Stephen Levis was that he could deliver on time. Because Ian McKay was hopeless. Yeah. Wonderful bloke. He's a very nice bloke, but just try and get him. I used to think that when he was doing uh, the Ian's monsters and things, and there's some really brilliant fantasy illustrations there. I used to think that if he had a deadline, that was the day when he'd actually start working on a piece of art. You know, and yeah. Actually, that's another one that there's a food chain that you have to follow through. I don't know whether you remember that one, but
with the fish.
Eats that with the fish. Yeah, this
Yeah.
one eats that one, eats that one, eats that one, all going down the chain. And I thought that was quite a neat one.
Yeah.
But the trouble is, all the fish look like normal fish in a fishmonger. You know, it's really, butch with huge claws and things like that. But yeah, to be, but it was good. Yeah.
So as you continue producing the Fighting Fantasy books and Games Workshop's going from strength to strength and Citadel is growing within Games Workshop, there came a time when you and Ian Livingstone decided to step away essentially and hand over the reins to Bryan Ansell. And I sort of wondered what your sort of reflections are on that now, looking back so many years later and sort of thinking about how you might have felt at that time. What was it like during that?
The thing about it was that we just couldn't keep on going like this. I mean, we'd have this routine with getting up, going into work, the workshop, and coming back in the evening and sitting typing. And the girlfriends are, glad to see us. I was going back to the typewriter. Not much fun for them. And we were also being offered, as I said before, publicity stories around the Far East and Australia and all sorts of things. And it was a difficult decision to make, but at the time we had guarantees with the bank and all that sort of stuff. And we decided, Bryan would be a perfect person to take over because, as he rightly pointed out, it was the Citadel that was making the most profits. See? And we just felt that we sort of needed a break, and that's what we did. We had a break. Of course, looking back now, and the company went the Warhammer way, and is valued at, I couldn't say what it's valued at now, £1 billion or something like that. Oof. But that was a long way off the way it was at the time, and it seemed quite reasonable. The amount that we charged, and there was we kept some of the shareholding back, but Bryan did a good job, and sadly no longer with us for the last couple of months. I think he's passed over. Anyway, yeah. He did a really good job with Citadel and deserved the success he got. Well, and the team as well. He had a good team with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, was it just looking at how Games Workshop changed? Obviously, it did become so focused on Warhammer and get so focused on the sort of miniature side of things. It's a big change from where you started it with the focus more on, well, even the wooden games and then the role-playing games. Did you expect or sort of envisage that kind of journey for the company at any point, or has it been interesting to see it unfold and go in that direction?
Well, it has, yes. To see what could be done with Games Workshop, given the determination, I think, and the ability to manage it, and then we would never, well, we probably would have done, but we would never have thought of doing the whole thing over to Warhammer. Yeah, no, I don't think we'd ever have done that because we wanted our shops to stock all games, and it weren't like that. So yeah, they did well out of it. We did well out of it, and sometime later, all the investors did well out of it. I wonder where it's going next.
Yeah, certainly continues on that upward trend. It seems like that growth trend. Yeah,
thinking maybe that who would be a suitable purchaser for Games Workshop now, or would, I suppose, the thing that next would have been Warhammer computer games, because they tried that earlier on, and I remember thinking it's a risky thing. So I was working with Lionhead at the time, so I knew how risky this whole thing was, and I said, get somebody else to finance it, basically, which I think they did, and I think they've got other things going there as well, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And looking into movies and TV and all sorts of stuff in that sort of space. But it's interesting. You mentioned the sort of the computer games evolution, I suppose, because there's not quite a computer game, but you did take your storytelling approach. You sort of choose your game book, choose the next adventure sort of approach into the technological realm when you created F.I.S.T. So your fancy interactive scenarios by telephone. I mean, unfortunately, I missed out on those when they were first around. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about those, if you could reflect on creating the phone-based game book.
Well, I remember at the time that a computer company that had what they had that was unique was that this is before the digital dialing, where it would count the number of clicks on a rotary dial telephone. So you switch it round and you go click 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 click, and because it could pick up the numbers 1, 2, 0, that made it specially good for use as a games platform. And there was a company called Computer Dial that had this technology, and this was a company that was owned by the head of, or the ex-head of Chrysler Motors, I think, in America, one of the big motor companies. And he'd sort of left to start a business off with his sons, 2 sons. And they were putting this together. When one of their friends had told them, hey, you want to check out this book series, because they're doing really well. And so so it was almost like we were supposed to be doing a fantasy version of I think number 26. So we're all geared up for this number 26 on was going to be F.I.S.T. Well, it was going to be something. It was just going to be called. And I took it over as a project and suddenly realized that you can't do it like this. You can't have 2 minutes of speech and then make a decision and then another 3 minutes of speech, because apart from anything else, people were paying by the minute. But that was the deal. That was what it was. There was a prize on sale. There were prizes available to the monthly winners. And it was almost like somebody had given me a pack of cards and said, we got these things, these card things, and you can use them for all sorts of different things. How about using them for they're for fortune telling. And that's what they did. Russell Grant was an astrologer at the time, and he was doing a deal with them. People would dial in their birth dates, and he'd read out their horoscopes. And it was to think about having this platform to do games with them. That was absolutely fantastic. I mean, the vision was there, and say I did the first one, and wasn't sure how it was going to work at all, and it turned out to be a great success. And I happened to be living in Spain at the time, and I remember my mother phoning me up and saying, "Oh, we just had the first royalty check in," and it was an awful lot. She was very chuffed with that. Finally, finally, I was doing something that she approved of. Yeah. That went on. I remember the sequence where they put it on the back on the TV page of the Daily Mirror, just to see how it'd go, and that one took 5,000 calls in a day. So about a week later they went on the back page of the Sun. You can't get any bigger than that, and got 7,500 calls, and the computer dial chaps were phoning me up. Oh, this is great! You've got to do more of them, that kind of thing. And I did, and did 3 fantasy ones and 1 gladiators one, which was a match your buddy and slaughter.
I mean, how long were they? So if I were to complete F.I.S.T, the first adventure, like what was the total length of time it would take me to get to the end?
Yeah.
No,
I don't know. I don't know whether it's ever been tried. Well, somebody's tried it because they were paying out in gold sovereigns. So somebody's
sure.
I would have thought something like I don't know, half an hour,
Right?
Maybe a bit longer than that. But
And
you can always save your game. There's a revolutionary thing there. You can save your game.
How did that work? Do you remember how that actually worked? That you could say, was it you were given a code to dial in next time?
Yeah,
right.
That's right. And it could connect you with the computer that ran it, and you could jump back in where you left out.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I guess because you had multiple with it, like different options and choices as well. So, how much did you have to write and record for each one?
Oh, a lot. There was a lot. I've just digging out the old tapes from F.I.S.T, and I've got most of them. I think. So you can see how we've got how much we got left on it, because tape goes. Tape degenerates.
Yeah, I suppose, because is that the only archive sort of copies of some of those as well?
Yeah, and some of them never made it. I think the Gladiators one, which was quite good fun, they never made it. I don't know. See, the computers were taken over by Ladbrokes, and all Ladbrokes were interested in was online gambling. And these games that I was doing, they got a good 5-year run out of them, I think, and I did very well out of them. But it wasn't something Ladbrokes felt inclined to keep on going. But the lucky thing was that they saved most of the tapes, so I was able to take the tapes out and perhaps do something with them.
Yeah. Which is actually happening now as well, isn't it? Because Sound Realms recently announced that they're bringing the first F.I.S.T adventure back. Is that right?
That's what we're doing at the moment, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't quite know what they've got in mind for this. It should work fine if the tapes are all there. I remember the engineer saying if you store the tapes one way, you wind it up on a reel one way. It will degenerate after a few years, and if you do it backwards, it'll stay perfect.
Right.
So that's what we're trying.
Okay. Great. Yeah. So and that's likely to happen in the near future, hopefully, to sort of be back
Yeah,
and out there. Yeah.
depends. I don't know quite how they work, but I would have thought 6 months or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm very excited because now I'll finally get to try F.I.S.T.
Yeah.
for real for myself. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, me too, actually. Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. The other thing I just wanted to ask you as a sort of final question, Steve, was just that in Dice Men and a couple of other places, I think it's mentioned that your favorite game or one of your favorite board games was The Warlord by Mike Hayes, and I know that was one of those initial Games Workshop board games that was sort of redesigned to be Apocalypse and was released in that British Empire Strikes Back as well that you mentioned.
Yeah.
I just wondered if there were any other favorites that you've had over the years, any games that have really captured your imagination.
We're just looking at on the wall behind,
Right.
a copy of Warlord, but I think it's higher. Might be.
Do you want me to get it?
No, it's all right.
See the red box.
That's all it is, a red box. Yeah, I preferred the original one because it was pure and unadulterated. I mean, then he'd done things like introducing city areas and different things with the capitals. But yeah, it's funny. A few weeks, I've got various games games groups that I play with most of the days of the week, actually. And we did try and we did try and play Warlord, which was quite difficult because nobody had the same passion that I had about it. It didn't mean anything to them like that. I mean, they all agreed it was a good game, and I think it was the best-selling game in Empire Strikes Back. But yeah.
Were there any others that have given you that same level of passion and excitement?
Oh, that's what you asked me, wasn't it? Yeah. You asked me if there are any other games like that. Right, diatribe on Warlord. I'd say the one that I always think of as number 3 is Civilization. Civilization, either the online, the computer game, or the board game. That was just a fantastic game, and the research that got into it. I mean, jeez, it was brilliant. So that's my number 3.
Right.
So,
What's your number 2, if you'd be willing to share?
I don't know. That was Dungeons and Dragons.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. They should both be joint number 1, I think. I can't see Dungeons and Dragons being second to the Warlord.
Do you still play any D&D these days?
I haven't played D&D for a long time. Usually, it's you just show people how to play it. I mean, it's and there's such a variety in what you can do with the D&D rules and things. But no, I haven't played for quite some time, a role-playing game. But I still like my board games, computer games.
Fantastic. That's great. Well, I really appreciate you taking some time out, Steve, to talk to me about your experiences creating Games Workshop and Fighting Fantasy and all of the amazing stuff that you've done. So thank you for all of that and for giving us all of these amazing games and for chatting to me.
Yeah, no, a pleasure to chat to. Yeah, that was very easy, wasn't it? Yeah.
Honestly, just wow. I cannot believe that I got that experience. It was incredible to talk to Steve. Thank you, Steve, for taking the time to share so many memories and experiences with me. It was truly a joy and a just an incredible opportunity. So thank you so much. If you want to support the work I do here on the channel, then you can check out my Patreon, my Ko-fi, and my Discord, and you can use my Element Games affiliate links when you go and buy all of your hobby goodness, because that really helps support me too. Check out all of those via the links in the description. I've also included a link to the Sound Realms recreation of Steve Jackson's F.I.S.T. that is coming soon, so you can check that out and keep track of it as it develops. Thank you once again to Steve. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Jordan, and this is Jordan Sorcery.